November 13th, 1985. Armero, Colombia, 11:30 p.m. Jaime Rodriguez sits at his desk, studying for his final exams. Tomorrow morning, he'll return to school in his uniform, ready to prove what he's learned. He's 18 years old, in his final year. His future depends on these tests: university, a career, a life beyond this town. He hears a sound in the distance, like helicopters, lots of them. Then his mother screams from the other room. "Corre, run!" Jaime sprints outside into the darkness. Behind him comes a roar like thunder that doesn't stop. The ground shakes violently. He sees a tree in their yard and climbs fast. Years later, he'll recall, "I hadn't been up there 10 seconds when the avalanche arrived." A wall of mud, rock and debris slams into Armero at 50 kilometers per hour. In the darkness, entire neighborhoods vanish beneath the surge homes, a hospital, bridges crumbling like paper, and the school, Colegio Jorge Eliezer Gaitin, where hundreds of children had sat at their desks just hours earlier, is swallowed whole. By dawn, 29,000 people had lived in Armero. By dawn, 20,000 of them were dead, buried beneath a grey-brown mudplain that stretched as far as anyone could see. Among them, an entire generation of children who had left school that afternoon laughing and playing, unaware they would never return. This is the story of the night a town died, and the school that was buried alive with it. Armero, Colombia, 1985. A prosperous town of 29,000 people in the Tolima region, nicknamed Ciudad Blanca, the White City, for its sprawling cotton fields that stretched to the horizon like white clouds on the ground. Life here was good. Armero had grown wealthy from agriculture: cotton, rice, coffee. Families had built businesses over generations, raised children who stayed and raised their own children. The town had everything a community needed: schools, a modern hospital, churches, a central plaza where people gathered on weekends to socialize and watch their kids play. The streets were lined with homes, painted in bright colors: yellows, blues, pinks. Bougainvillea spilled over garden walls. In the evenings, the smell of dinner cooking drifted from open windows. Just 45 miles away loomed Nevado del Ruiz, a snow-capped volcano that rose 17,000 feet into the sky. On clear days, you could see it from Armero's Plaza Majestic, beautiful, seemingly benign. Most Armeritas had lived their entire lives in its shadow, without incident. Nevado del Ruiz had been dormant for 140 years. Their grandparents had never seen it erupt, nor had their parents. It was just part of the landscape, as permanent and unthreatening as the mountains themselves. But in September 1985, Nevado del Ruiz began to wake, the warnings ignored. Scientists noticed its first seismic activity beneath the volcano, small tremors that rattled dishes in nearby towns, steam vents opening on the summit. By late October, the warnings became urgent. Volcanologists from Colombian universities traveled to Nevado del Ruiz with their instruments, and what they found alarmed them. The volcano wasn't just restless, it was building toward an eruption. They drew hazard maps showing exactly what would happen. If Nevado del Ruiz erupted, the heat would melt the glaciers capping its summit. The meltwater would mix with volcanic ash and debris, creating lahars, volcanic mudflows that would race down the mountain at highway speeds, following river channels straight into the valleys below, straight into Armero. The scientists presented their findings to local and national authorities. They urged immediate evacuation of high-risk zones, showed the maps, explained the science. But evacuation is complicated, political, expensive. Local officials in Armero hesitated. This was peak cotton season, and evacuating would mean abandoning crops worth millions. Business owners worried about looting. People didn't want to leave their homes. At the school, teachers whispered in the staff room between classes. Some had heard about the warnings. "Should we be worried?" one asked. The principal shook his head. If it was serious, they'd tell us to evacuate. The authorities know what they're doing. National authorities, meanwhile, were paralyzed by indecision. No one wanted to be responsible for evacuating 29,000 people based on what might happen. What if they were wrong? What if the volcano didn't erupt? They'd look foolish, alarmist. So they waited, monitored, discussed, debated. The volcano didn't wait. On November 11th, 2 days before the disaster, Nevado del Ruiz had a small eruption and ash began falling on Armero and surrounding towns. Still, no evacuation order came. On November 12th, the day before the disaster, volcanic ash continued to fall. Children left school with grey powder dusting their uniforms and backpacks. Some played in it, treating it like snow, throwing ash at each other and laughing. Teachers wiped ash from windowsills and chalkboards. The janitor at Colegio Jorge Elisa Gayton swept the schoolyard 3 times that day, but the ash kept coming. "We'll need to clean again tomorrow," he muttered. Tomorrow. Always tomorrow. Parents watched the ash fall and worried, but stayed put. The authorities hadn't told them to leave. Surely if it was truly dangerous, someone would have said something. That evening, the town's Civil Defence Committee met and discussed the situation. Finally, they decided to make an announcement. The priest at the local church spoke over the town's loudspeakers, a system usually used to call people to mass or announce community events. He told residents to stay calm, to remain in their homes. The situation was being monitored. There was no immediate danger. "Please, stay calm. We are watching the volcano. If evacuation becomes necessary, we will inform you immediately." People went to bed reassured. It was the last announcement many of them would ever hear. Wednesday morning, November 13th. Just another day. Alarm clocks rang across Armero. Kids woke up, rubbed sleep from their eyes, got dressed in their school uniforms. Mothers made breakfast arepas, hot chocolate, eggs. Fathers read the newspaper, checked the time, reminded their children not to be late. At Colegio Jorge Elisa Gayton, Armero's main primary school, the day began like any other. Students arrived in groups, backpacks slung over shoulders, chattering about homework and weekend plans. Teachers unlocked classrooms, wrote the day's lessons on chalkboards, took attendance. Presente, presente, presente. Every child accounted for, every desk filled. Morning lessons began math, Spanish, history. The usual rhythm of a school day unfolded, pencils scratching on paper, hands raising to answer questions, the occasional giggle when someone passed a note. Lunchtime brought controlled chaos to the cafeteria. Kids traded snacks, complained about assignments, made plans to play soccer after school. During recess, the schoolyard filled with shouts and laughter. Games of tag, jump rope, boys kicking a worn soccer ball back and forth. Teachers stood in the shade, watching their students play, unaware that these were the last moments of normalcy they would ever witness. Afternoon classes resumed. More lessons. Some students struggled to pay attention, distracted by the sunshine outside, counting down minutes until dismissal. Finally, the bell rang. 3 p.m. School's out. Kids poured into the streets, free for the day. Some stopped to play soccer in the plaza. Others ran errands for their mothers picking up bread, delivering messages to neighbours. A few headed straight home to start on homework. "See you tomorrow," they called to each other. Tomorrow. By evening, Armero settled into its familiar routine. Families gathered for dinner. Kids did homework at kitchen tables while their mothers cooked and their fathers listened to the radio. Jaime Rodriguez went home and changed into comfortable clothes before returning to his studies. He had important exams the next day. He sat at his desk, textbooks open, and studied late into the night. He had plans, dreams. At the school, the last teacher locked the doors around 5 p.m. The janitor swept the floors, emptied trash bins, wiped down chalkboards. desks sat in neat rows, ready for students to return in the morning. Homework assignments waited in notebooks to be completed overnight. Pencils sat in desk drawers. Textbooks lay closed, lessons unfinished. Everything was ready for tomorrow. But tomorrow would never come. 9:30 p.m., the eruption. 45 miles away, Nevado del Ruiz erupted with explosive force. Molten rock and pyroclastic flows rushed down the volcano's slopes at incredible speed, instantly melting portions of the summit's glaciers. Millions of tons of ice turned to water in minutes. The meltwater mixed with volcanic debris, ash, and rock to create massive lahars that roared down the mountain, gathering speed and mass as they descended through river valleys. 3 separate lahars converged, creating a massive wave of mud, boulders, and debris traveling at over 50 kilometers per hour. In Armero, people heard nothing at first. The town sat in a valley, sound muffled by distance and terrain. Then, around 11:30 p.m., a deep rumbling began. Some thought it was helicopters. Others thought it was an earthquake. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. 11:31 p.m. impact. The lahar hit Armero like a tsunami made of concrete. A 3-meter-high wall of mud, rock, trees, and debris slammed into the town's eastern edge with devastating force. Buildings collapsed instantly. Homes were ripped from their foundations and swept away. The modern hospital crumbled. The roar was deafening as sound survivors would describe as like a freight train mixed with an avalanche. Jaime Rodriguez abandoned his textbooks and ran outside. In the chaos and darkness, he found a tree and climbed desperately. Below him, the mudflows swept past, carrying away his home, his neighborhood, everything he knew. The school was among the first structures to be hit. Colegio Jorge Elisa Gaitin, which had stood empty and dark, waiting for its students to return, was obliterated in seconds. The classrooms, the playground, the desks arranged in neat rows, all buried beneath tons of mud and debris. The lahar moved through Armero in waves, each one bringing more destruction. Some people had minutes to react, others had seconds. Many had no time at all. Those who managed to reach rooftops or high ground watched in horror as their town was erased in front of them.
Las madres con los niños en los brazos de la...
The darkness made it impossible to see clearly, but the sounds told the story buildings collapsing, people screaming, the relentless roar of the mudflow. The entire catastrophe lasted less than 10 minutes. By 11:40 p.m., it was over. Armero was gone. Dawn and aftermath. When the sun rose on November 14th, survivors saw a landscape transformed into nightmare. Where Armero had stood the day before, its colourful houses, its bustling streets, its school full of life there, was now only a grey-brown wasteland. The mudflow had buried everything under a layer of debris 2 meters deep in some places. The silence was overwhelming. No birds, no dogs barking, no children playing, just silence. Jaime Rodriguez climbed down from his tree at first light. He was one of approximately 5,000 survivors. As he walked through the ruins, searching for his family, he passed what he later realized was the school's location. Nothing remained visible. No walls, no playground, just mud. Bodies began to surface as the mud settled. Rescue workers arrived from across Colombia, but there was little they could do. The sheer scale of the disaster overwhelmed all efforts. The official death toll would eventually reach 23,000, though the exact number may never be known. Among the dead, hundreds of children who had played in the schoolyard just the day before. Omaira Sninchez. 3 days after the disaster, rescue workers heard a faint voice calling from beneath the rubble. Omaira Sninchez, 13 years old, was trapped in the ruins of what had been her home. The debris of the collapsed house had pinned her, and rising water from broken pipes was slowly filling the space around her. Rescue teams worked frantically to free her, but the debris was too heavy and the water kept rising. They couldn't get her out without equipment they didn't have. For 60 hours, Armero remained trapped while the world watched. Journalists arrived. Cameras recorded everything. Her face became known around the globe. Nurses stayed with her. Photographers documented her ordeal. Armero remained conscious through most of it, talking to the rescuers, asking about her family, growing delirious with fever. Photojournalist Frank Fournier knelt beside her, trying to offer comfort. At one point, Armero looked at him with wide, feverish eyes and said, "Will you take me to school? I don't want to be late." Those words shattered him. A 13-year-old girl, dying in freezing mud, worried about missing class. After nearly 60 hours trapped in the water, Armero Sniches died of hypothermia and gangrene. The photograph Fournier took of her eyes staring into the camera, water up to her neck, won the 1985 World Press Photo Prize. But for Fournier, the image would haunt him forever. Armero became the face of Armero's lost children, a symbol of innocence destroyed. The fate of Armero's children remains the deepest wound. In the chaos after the disaster, approximately 580 children were reported missing. Some were confirmed dead, buried with their families, but many simply vanished. Wounded or orphaned children were swept into makeshift shelters. Helicopters airlifted them to hospitals. In the confusion, hundreds were hastily declared orphans and sent away, some even adopted abroad. Only about 150 children were confirmed rescued alive. Of those, 71 were adopted, often under questionable circumstances. Families desperate to help took in children without proper documentation. Some adoptions happened so quickly that relatives searching for missing kids never had a chance to find them. To this day, only 4 reunions have been made between adopted children and their birth families. The rest remain unknown. Mara Gladys Primo was rescued alive from the mud, but her 2 young children were not. Decades later, she was watching archival news footage of the disaster when she saw something that made her heart stop. A boy being carried from the wreckage. A boy she recognized. Her son. Proof that he had lived, at least briefly, beyond that terrible night. But she still doesn't know what happened to him. Whether he was adopted, whether he's alive somewhere, not knowing his own history. My heart tells me they are alive. She says, 4 decades later, and I will keep waiting until the day I die. This is the enduring pain of Armero, not just the 23,000 confirmed dead, but the hundreds of children who disappeared into the chaos, leaving families with nothing but hope and unanswered questions. Lessons and legacy. In the aftermath, Colombia faced a reckoning. At funerals, mourners carried banners that read, "The volcano didn't kill 23,000 people. The government killed them." The warnings had been there. The hazard maps existed. Scientists had begged authorities to evacuate. But bureaucracy, hesitation, and the fear of being wrong had paralyzed decision makers, and 23,000 people paid the price. The disaster led to sweeping reforms. Colombia built a modern disaster warning system and instituted strict evacuation protocols near active volcanoes. In 1989, just 4 years after Armero, Nevado del Ruiz showed signs of unrest again. This time, authorities didn't hesitate. Over 2,300 people were evacuated immediately. No one died. The lesson of Armero had been learned. But for the survivors, for the families of the lost children, for the mothers still waiting for answers, no reform could bring back what was taken. Armero was never rebuilt. In 1986, Pope John Paul II visited the ruins and declared the site a Campo Santo, a field of saints, sacred ground where the dead should rest undisturbed. Today, it remains an open-air memorial. grass and trees have reclaimed the mudflat, but the ruins are still visible foundation walls, collapsed buildings, rusted vehicles jutting from the earth. Makeshift crosses mark where families believe their loved ones lie. Visitors describe it as a real-world Pompeii, everything frozen in time. The silence is overwhelming. Where Colegio Jorge Elisa Gatin once stood, there is only earth and grass. No plaque marks the spot. No monument remembers the classrooms, the playground, the desks where children sat. But former students who survived know exactly where it was. Every year, Colombians gather to honor the lost. On the 40th anniversary in 2025, relatives and survivors assembled by the nearby Gual River. They had prepared hundreds of small wooden boats, each bearing a photograph and candle for a child who disappeared in the mudslide. One by one, they released the boats into the water. As the tiny vessels drifted downstream, candles flickering, people wept openly. "It's been 40 years, one mother said, watching her boat disappear around a bend. But we're still looking for you." The statue of Armero Snitches has become a pilgrimage site. It stands on the spot where she died, trapped and asking to go to school. People leave flowers, letters, chalk messages on the ground around her memorial. Many Colombians believe she is a guardian angel now, watching over the lost children of Armero. Today, if you visit Armero, you'll find silence. The ruins sit beneath overgrown grass. Foundations of buildings poke through the earth. A church bell, half buried. Walls with no roofs. Roads that lead nowhere. Colegio Jorge Elisa Gatin is gone, with no trace remaining. The classrooms where children learnt, the playground where they ran during recess, the desks where they sat, the chalkboards where teachers wrote lessons, all buried beneath the earth. Former students who survived carry the memory. They remember the last day, November 13th, 1985, a Wednesday like any other. They remember homework assignments they never completed, exams they never took, friends they never saw again. The tragedy of Armero is not just about a volcano or a mudslide or failed warnings. It's about ordinary lives interrupted. Children who kissed their parents goodbye one morning and never came home. Teachers who locked their classroom doors, expecting to unlock them again the next day. It's about a town that went to sleep and never woke up. Armero Snitches is there still in the hearts of those who remember. 13 years old forever, asking to go to school. Her question echoes across the decades. I don't want to be late. None of them were late. They simply never arrived. The school bell never rang again. The children never returned. But they are not forgotten. In the flowers left at Armero's statue, in the boats released on the river, in the ruins where grass now grows, the children of Armero remain, still asking not to be late for school.